I'm going to pass it over to Matt to give us a quick intro, and then we will get started on today's conversation.
Hello, everybody. It's Matt Tonelden from Onnit. I head up the account management and sales function here at Onnit. Onnit is a software provider to large legal, and we have a colleague sister company that works with smaller companies. But really, the reason I'm here is that I'm an attorney by training, and I'm a sales leader within our organization. I did the private practice thing for about 14 years, and then have been in software as a sales leader for now 22 years. So probably have much the same experience as a lot of you with a small company that became a bigger company that sold to another company that now has a lot of contracts that we process. It's a big part of my day. So I think we're kind of all in a peerage here. I just want to introduce the panelists. I'm really here principally just to facilitate. So Jackie, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jackie Leahy. I'm from Boston, and I'm the founder and fractional revenue operations advisor at Activate Magic.
Thanks, Jackie. Diego? Whoop.
Sorry about that. My name is Diego Torres. I'm the worldwide director of global contracts team, as well as legal operations and technology at Lenovo. And I've been doing this for 20 plus years myself at IBM, Cisco, now Lenovo. I just travel to technical companies within North Carolina, here where I'm at the moment. So pleasure to be able to work with all of you on this webinar.
Jake.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm Jake Dunlap. I'm the CEO of Scaled Consulting. We are a revenue strategy enablement and operations firm, really helping companies to operationalize and optimize their processes with modern process and technology. So looking forward to the conversation and seeing what I can add to the dialogue.
Sure. So let me just talk to a couple of questions to y'all. One of the things I've enjoyed most about the last 10 years of my career is just kind of coming into the contract space. Our company works in other parts of legal operations and has been working in the contract space about 10 years. So I got to be a student late in life, which I enjoy doing. There is such a wealth of ways in which the CLM solution can help customers from an efficiency point of view. But if I had to ask each one of you, and I'll probably just start with Jackie, what's your favorite customer story about the way in which there was just tangible? I'm just going to say efficiency because you get to choose of what kind. Jackie.
Efficiency. I'm so sorry. Efficiency in legal ops.
Or in any place in the company. In other words, how did the CLM make the trains move faster, or whatever version of efficiency you want to articulate?
Yeah, I think it's getting everyone, all parts of the business on the same team, like spiritually, like tangibly, physically, because I don't know if you know this, but legal wants to say yes. Like I come from sales. I've been in ops for a while. And I used to actually sell legal tech software to in-house legal teams. And the thing that surprised me was legal wants to say yes. Like they don't want to be like, oh, it's in legal. That's not who they are. That's not who they stand for, right? That's not what they stand for. They want to say yes. So CLMs, when done properly, they get everyone on the same page. So it's not stuck in legal. So they can both like reduce friction or eliminate friction from your deal. Like they want sales to crush it while protecting the strategy in the future of the company. Because that's, they're a strategic partner and a protective partner of the firm.
I love that. I mean, I guess there's that old negotiations book called Getting to Yes. So maybe that's what CLM's here to help us do fundamentally, right? I can certainly remember when the initial startup I was at, and I was in a sales role. Pretty much the only person I had to review the contract with was the CEO. Now there's 10 people in the process, here. And so I hear you loud and clear about that sort of collaboration piece. Diego, I'm proud to say you're a customer, so I think I know a few of your stories, but if you had to pick a favorite one of any kind about how CLM kind of speeds the plow or make things better, I was obviously sort of talking top of house here, but you choose.
Sure. I think Jackie hit on one of the important ones you got to start with, which is getting everybody on the same page, right? And that's how to access legal services. So it helps create a front door for how somebody engages the legal department to be able to work on some of these contracts, but also provide all the different tools that are needed to be able to get that job done as quickly as possible. Access to the right templates, getting the contract request to the right attorney at the right time, who has the right bandwidth, right? As well as then keeping everybody within the process of how it flows through a contract lifecycle management philosophy, right? From request all the way, even past signature to reporting and audit and renewing and everything. Having all of those pieces automated, accessible, transparent, with collaboration really drives efficiency across the board. I can always go into more details and talk about this all day, as you know, Matt, but we'll see what questions people have as well. But it's definitely, Jackie's hitting on one of the most important pieces, is driving those people together to create a business outcome that works for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, if from my perspective, I always tell my sales team, if you're fundamentally creating a meeting the company wants to have with itself and you're facilitating that meeting, then you're selling the right way. And so it's in some ways, these tools can become a way in which the company organizes its processes, and it just ends up getting codified in technology, right? Some of them might have been organized ahead of time. Some of them might get polished in the technology. So Jake, you can either pick up on that thread or start us on another one in your experience.
Yeah, I think where I, the same vein of Jackie saying that legal wants to say that, yes, I think that the other piece is that without a tool or system or processes here, the sales team also wants to move quickly as well. And I think what happens is most of the time, what can and can't be done with legal is kind of tribal knowledge versus, documented. And so sales teams really clearly understand, these are my boundaries and parameters. These are alternatives. These are things that I can do. And so that to me is probably the biggest way that I see, process improvements and technology speeding this up, because the sales team is like, I don't know what to do here. And so they're passing things over that candidly, they don't need to be passing over at times, or that maybe have already been approved or agreed to from a concession standpoint. And so they're delaying deals. And so deals are being delayed 5, 10, 15, 20+% because there's this automatic, like, if it's contract or legal, like, I don't know what to do. And so I think the ability to have clear communication throughout for both the sales team and, different members of the, deal desk, I think is probably the biggest impact that I see, is that it just allows the team, the sales organization, to move much faster through the contracting phase, which is already, a little bit of pulling teeth at times.
Yeah, as Jackie was saying in the chat, that a lot of that exists as tribal knowledge, but it's essentially making what yes looks like manifest, right? The path that the things need to take and who needs to have eyes on what in what order. Yeah, here. As just kind of pivoting to the other end of the spectrum, I was out at Clock, as probably several of the folks on the line were. And certainly ChatGPT was dominating the conversation. I guess, if we allow that's such a game-changing tool that it can probably I'm not going to use the word everything. I don't know if it can do everything, but it can do a lot of things. Any early thoughts on where it might have the most immediate impact in the contracting process? And I guess I'm going to start, Jake, with you this time.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk in sales around ChatGPT for all different aspects of sales, from research, et cetera. I don't think you want, maybe I'll talk about what I don't think you want to use AI for, is I don't think you want to use AI for your sales team to get legal advice or to get insights into what they can and can't do. There are a lot of amazing applications for it. And I think some of that will be more like in the contracting process, where it's around AI helping to identify potential flags and things like that, where I think we'll see a lot of the benefit. But I also think if you don't have a clear SLA in mind and you're encouraging your team in the contracting process to use AI, you also need to have parameters there around what are some of the things that they could utilize it for. But I think a lot of it will be more around identification on the back end for issues or flags or things that might come up. I think over time you might be able to train a specific bot that will help kind of a sales rep navigate their own internal, world, their own little walled garden. But, we're certainly not there yet. So there's kind of a don't, and maybe, where I see it going.
Yeah, here, fair. Well, Diego, you have our CLM AI, and so there's some do's, and if you want to feature any of them or things that have nothing to do with on it, it's just fine as well.
No, I think it's good, right? It's definitely a powerful tool that can be used to help expedite things, right? You've heard me throw out the statistics before, but when we first started looking at what we can use it for, we started with the easy agreement of an NDA, and just by leveraging the technology, reduced our review time by 42%. I mean, that's game changing in and of itself. But the way the technology is evolving and stuff, and being able to use the AI to kind of do that initial review and start to highlight the things that are different from what your normal standard is, as well as have equal access to our rationale behind why our position is where it is, some of our fallback clauses to utilize, those are great. But for more germane to your pieces, how can ChatGPT actually enhance that, right? It could be that maybe for some reason I haven't created a clause library to cover this situation, but I want to use ChatGPT and ask a normal question of, have I kind of agreed to something similar in the rest of my contract portfolio, and have it spit back, yes, actually, here's 7 agreements where you did, and here's the context in which you did that in. And so if I can get access to stuff like that, that's also super helpful. And it just continues to enhance how we're leveraging AI to help our attorneys get to the things that we need to do, which is spot issues, point out risk, and then mitigate it much more quickly.
Yeah,
that's how I'd like to see it.
Yeah, any tool that's leveraging a large language model is pretty good at finding things, right? And so, and then Jackie, any thoughts on that topic?
I have so many thoughts. Oh no, I'm frozen. Okay, so while you were at Clock, I was a couple buildings down in Vegas at Caesars at the Gartner CSO event, and the spicy take coming out of that was to stop thinking about generative AI and ChatGPT as a tool and more as a team member. And going forward in the future, rather than it being an assistant, it actually handling a function. So in this case, I think, Diego, the things that you're talking about is like almost like having a paralegal right by your side, right? Being like, yes, sir, actually, you did use that clause over here. And Matt, what you're talking about with that, like having that huge language library, almost like how we use Grammarly, having legal tech with that legal AI training to give prescriptive insights. Like in Grammarly, it's like, nobody's going to really understand what you're saying. You're speaking like in a master's program, what you're writing. In the same vein, it could be like, if you use that language, there's a 40% chance that it'll come back redlined. Whereas if you use this slight variation, there's a 12% chance that'll come back. And you can really only do that when you have that massive collection of data and insights, which is something that specific legal tech companies are just like primed to be able to do.
Yeah, here it's I guess if we pull the lens all the way back now to your collective experience and sort of making the business case. So now we're talking almost about how you talk about a project internally. Diego, I know that Lenovo's been on a long path with its contract center of excellence, probably a couple business cases along the way. Any sort of tools and tips and for folks on the line who are in the process of trying to engender that kind of change?
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff that could be said about that, right? I think as you're looking to implement any technology, a lot of the pre-work that you do is super important to how successful you will be when you start to implement that technology. And so, especially if you're looking for a CLM, even AI on many levels, it needs a source, right? And so you need to have some processes in place, some governance models in place, some templates, some playbooks, some things that will help figure out. You're laying the foundation, and now you're using the tools to automate those pieces, right? I can have a process for who handles this type of, like who handles PCs going to so-and-so, right? Okay, great, that's fine, but it's all manual. But when you can start to leverage the technology in a way that says, okay, if that's the right person, then when a request comes in and someone asks, automatically routes to that person. They get an email that the person is assigned. They start to get a name and a face associated with their request. It starts what Jackie said about getting the right people together. And if you can do all that foundational work, you'll be so far ahead when you start to do your business planning and everything, because then you start to listen to what people can offer and you can start tying, here's my requirement, so here's a solution that does it. I think the second thing is find a partner. I know, Matt, this is not on it focused overall, but, great partnerships are hard to come by. And when you can formulate those, that really helps strengthen everything, because then you're listening and you're not fighting. You're not trying to push things that people aren't going to use. You're not going to ask for over customization. You're designing something that supports you and your customers across the board when you tie a partnership with some of these technology vendors. But have your basis down and then learn quickly, as fast as you can, how to quantify return on investment. The faster you can do that, the faster finance says yes. If you can't do it, you're going to keep going back and forth until you speak their language. So speak their language quickly.
Great stuff. Jake, I'm sure you've been part of a bunch of these kinds of projects. Any sort of words to the wise about do's and don'ts in trying to either secure the funding or get something started or ensure it's successful, any of those?
Yeah, I think they're somewhat of all intertwined at this point. Meaning, if you can't prove the ROI, I think today life has become much more difficult. Other than trust me. So for me, I think it was hit on a little bit, but it all starts with the process and the workflow and making sure that you have the right stakeholders at the table. Meaning and again, I'll kind of take where I see this go wrong, because as a consulting firm, we'll come in on the back of some of these changes, whether it's a new CLM, CPQ, whatever the tool might be. And usually what happened is a group got excited and moved forward. And even if they were able to get it approved, and then the sales organization, let's say if it's the operations, whether it's on the finance side or the sales or the RevOps side, did most of the decision making. The VP was brought in or CRO was brought in, but the sales organization wasn't involved in the process, or frontline sales managers to get their input on the deployment plan or nuances is when I see it consistently go left. And so what I would say is that when these things go right, what organizations do is kind of pre-deployment or pre-purchase is just to sit down and talk about the why with the sales organization. Here's the why. This isn't just another tool. This isn't something that we need you to spend more time on, but here's the why. Explain the why. Put together, we call them tiger teams of people that can be representative of different sales groups. And your likelihood to succeed is going to, 3 or 4x. So I would just make sure that as you're embarking on this type of journey, you're getting the voice of your internal customers to make sure that the solution that ends up getting deployed is something that they'll not reject and use excited. They'll be excited to use it.
Yeah. Well, I'm old enough to remember the birth of CRM, right? And the world that existed before Salesforce, and then all the excitement that was, I think, appropriately generated with CRM. And fairly quickly in that sort of 90s swath of time, people, including some of the better minds, said, if you don't have a good CRM strategy, you're not going to be competitive and you're going to fall behind. So in other words, that it was a means of competitive advantage to ultimately have a good customer relations management system and strategy. I believe that contracts is just as potent a potential source of competitive advantage when you are really successful with it, and when you're dialing it in to not just speed up your motion, but to fundamentally make you easier to buy from. We want to sell things too, and so I guess, has anyone seen an example where folks were so successful with their solution that even if in a small way, they believed it actually gave them a point of competitive advantage in their market? And I'm not going to call on people and just ask for anyone to raise a hand. If no one raises their hand, then I'll tell 4 stories, but I'd rather you tell your story.
I'll give more of an anecdotal follow-up to what I mentioned in my success story, is that I think in the modern environment that we exist in sales, where people on the other end in our B2C lives, we expect things to happen very quickly. It's already trickling into quite a bit of our B2B life. And if there are ways to reduce friction in your sales process, to avoid unnecessary back and forth, those are the companies that are going to win. The companies that don't throw up barriers of like, oh, we've got to do this here, you've got to talk to this person here, oh, now we'll have to get legal involved on every deal, or we'll have to get someone else from my side. The companies that are able to empower buyers to move faster will, without a doubt, have a competitive advantage as we move to a world where we value speed more than at times we'll take a slightly inferior product if we know it's going to ship tomorrow versus ship in a week. And we all do this on Amazon every single day. And a lot of that same behavior is coming to B2B. So if your company does not have a process in place and a clear way that the sales organization understands how to interact with buyers throughout the contracting process, and instead it becomes cumbersome, you could easily see a competitor coming in with a much easier way to do business that they would want to move forward with.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll have to, I'm so sorry, Jackie, I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Well, just building on what Jake said, this goes to something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, is refactoring our sales process around the buyer's journey. So anything that we can do to make it easier for that end person who's going through the purchasing process, the better. And so one simple thing that like legal tech or in other things is just to have the sales team equipped with what are the usual things that the buyer will ask for when it comes to contracts, and what is our general response to that, and what is and is not negotiable. That way, when they're live and talking to someone and they hear, you know, the person on the other end talking about opt-outs and reassignment under controlling, or all these things that normally as salespeople we don't really have that exposure to, pre-filling them with like, okay, here's the down and dirty about contract law for what you need to know. So that when you're hearing that, be like, you know what, based on what you're saying, just knowing what is and is not negotiable. That way we're empowering that sales rep to be a better partner for the buyer.
Yeah, well said. Diego?
Yeah, absolutely. To follow along as well, you know, Jake was talking about reducing friction to transaction, right? Nothing could be further from the truth. The last thing you ever want to hear somebody say is, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't take this long, or so-and-so doesn't do it that way, right? Because they're immediately comparing you to your competitor, and you can lose them when you don't have it. And so the faster you can get to that point, I think training is a good thing, right? We have kind of a contracts 101 class geared towards each different product as well, to say, okay, for this product, here's the gotchas that you want to try to avoid because you're going to cause a delay, as those things are what we require to do it, right? Showstoppers, another good thing to outline. But reducing the cycle time of a contract, leveraging a CLM system so far has been a major piece of success for Lenovo, right? When I first started and we started measuring stuff, we were at, 45 days to turn a contract around, 20 something days to get it reviewed by an attorney, just because nobody knew where anything was. Things weren't coming in correctly, nothing standardized, so on and so forth. We start to implement our CLM solution, and what do we see now a year later is, about 72% reduction in cycle time from, 27 days of a legal review down to just over 2. Full contracts down from the 45 days down to just over 9. And a lot of it is, again, leveraging those processes, automating them through the technology, and bringing everybody together so that you can speak as one as you go to those customers. But Jackie, I didn't think broad enough about what you said, and I am going to now get that moving a little bit better within my organization, because I think you bring out some very good points of things that we haven't even thought of to deploy. So thank you for that nugget. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things Lenovo is pretty good at is attributing that success to the entire team, right? It's not the technology, it's not the core team. It's the if you get those stats down to that kind of significant of a change, it's because everybody's playing ball on this, the same team. So yeah, here. I guess the next thing I was wondering about is I've been selling legal technology essentially since there's been legal technology, so for about 25 years, which means that I've kind of been on the journey of when it was looked at askance, when it was early adopted, when it was became de rigueur in certain places where if you were a corporate, you just needed to have whatever it is, the matter management system, the spend management system, the CLM. How good a job do you think we are doing as an industry overall? And by that, I mean both the consulting teams and the software teams about kind of meeting our user where they live. In other words, not engendering change for change's sake, but to kind of meet them where they live and push them just far enough to actually make things better, as opposed to change their whole world. So I don't know, Jake, and I'm happy if you want to give the whole industry a C-. I mean, this is a genuine question, right?
Yeah. Well, I think right now, if you think about what's happened in sales over the last, I mean, it started 2016. There weren't that many tools that existed that the sales team interacted with, right? If you look at before, like you mentioned, there's a CRM, there's maybe a contact database. And so I think what you've seen over the last, really 4 or 5 years is just an inundating sales organizations with new technology and promises of either productivity gains, revenue gains, savings, etc. So I think as you think about these projects, I would give sales and sales leadership, probably a C around implementing new technologies that actually drive home the change that they're hoping for. That's why they churn off those technologies, multiple years later. But I think anything that's infrastructure based, that a sales organization can truly understand the benefit to them and really clearly, I mean, some of the stats that he mentioned, I mean, that's a pretty compelling, story there. But again, I think a lot of these, the reason I'd say it's a C around technology and probably not always thinking about tools like a CLM to drive efficiency is because they kind of are the behind the scenes, the contracting type tools at times, even though they're customer facing, that we don't think about as these like shiny new toys sometimes. And so I think a lot of this is, and I think it was, Diego mentioned at the beginning, it's like, taking the time to map the processes around where is the bottleneck, where are we seeing, oh, wow, look at the sales cycle time. And then really clearly identifying alternative solutions that aren't just something that you heard about on a Slack channel or talking to your buddy over drinks, that the sexy new technology versus the type of technology that can actually show real ROI on improving a sales cycle. So to me, a lot of this starts back to just implementing a tool or buying a tool, even if it could provide this level of, call it extra gains. You won't see them unless, again, going back to what I said before, you're not thinking about the change management aspects of it. And so I would give us a solid probably C across all technologies and maybe a C- in terms of looking at more, we'll call like infrastructure or process flow tools versus, a better call recording tool or something like that.
Jackie? You don't have
I don't have a letter grade.
Yeah.
I'm a former kindergarten teacher. We're more just like, I just want to commend you for all the effort. But I think the difference between where we are and where we need to go is meeting people. I think what you were saying before is like where they already are. Like as much as the technology can embed in the end user's life already, like just like salespeople live in our inboxes or our cell phones. Legal likes Microsoft Word. Like, and anytime you try to get them to redline contracts in your custom web app, they're just not gonna like it. So as much as you can, like meet people where they are. And overall, tools have made the sales job harder. Like overwhelmed, inundated. So it's like you can't really get to ROI because you're just pissing people off and making their job harder. So I think in general, and I say this as a lover of tech stack, I think the more and more that we can meet people where they are or capture things just by your normal workflow, like working with Microsoft Excel, working within a Chrome extension and things like that to just kind of put a little cracker in your pocket as you're already on your walk, rather than like, oh, come over here for some lemonade.
When I started in legal, it was WordPerfect. Otherwise, I agree with everything you said.
WordPerfect. Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Diego, Diego, there's a great question, which I'm going to read out, but I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of give your thoughts on meet people where they are.
Sure. I think sometimes we're the enemy, right? These our internal legal departments or just internal customers, only because we don't really know what we want, right? Jake, you said it earlier. Somebody sees a new shiny toy and they want to go play and they want to bring it in and, oh, look how great it is. But I think really what could help is, one, keep it simple, right? Because that means less change. Keep it pretty, so have a nice UI. Definitely help us understand how to document our own process, right? Too many times people have no idea. They're just like, oh yeah, we do it this way. And then you talk to the person sitting next to them, I do it that way. And that's wrong. But I think, Jake, you hit a really good point. The change management on the back end, there's not enough help from the consultants or the implementation partners and stuff as I would like to see. Now, I want it all handed to me because I don't want to have to do the change management. So granted that I do need to be responsible for some of it, and I get that, but you're the person who's the professional of the technology that you're helping either sell or implement. And so if you can help my team better understand it and follow different pedagogical methods, right? Jackie's a kindergarten teacher, right? People learn in 3 different ways usually: kinesthetic, hands-on, visual, or auditory. Have different modalities so that people's different learning styles can be met, which then goes back to Jackie's point of meet us where we are. But change management is huge. If we did not have our chief legal officer telling everybody, you will use this tool or you don't get your contracts done, we're not going to be as successful. Because now it's hey, I guess you could use it, right? And that's not the case. It's no, there's a whole big push behind it to all do it. But if you don't have that change management as a good part of it, and Jackie, I think you hit one more last point that was really good, is have a good API, right? Work with other stuff. Because if you limit it to like 2 things and we don't want to use those 2 things, you've just limited your return on investment to our organization. So I'll let you get to that question though, Matt. Thank you.
No, please. So I'm just going to read it out verbatim, and then I'm going to take a little pass at giving one answer to it. So the question is, contracts have become an issue in complex sales situations with big product and service bundles, regulatory issues, country-specific conditions. Do you see pricing or packaging driving a lot of the contracting back or forth? And there may be a couple of different questions in there, and they're all good ones. Yeah, I mean, our organization, just speaking in my role as a sales leader, is global. And I've been, I don't practice law. We have a GC who does the legal part of the contracts, but I'm the business owner of the contract. And it feels a little bit like contracts have become treaties and complexity, right? We've got multiple different kinds of privacy issues. We have multiple different kinds of IT issues. We have a whole lot of governance, and it's really, the terms and conditions are almost the easy part to negotiate because these agreements are so complicated and specific to jurisdiction. So I think I agree with the premise of the question for sure, that, as business becomes more global and more complicated, and essentially frictionless as to where you can do your business, these contracts are becoming almost very complicated instruments. For us, that's created an opportunity not only to help folks with the pre-signature part of that, but as world events happen, we have an office in the Ukraine, so we're very tuned into what's happening there. And we have customers who had, the good or bad fortune of doing business in Russia, who are now going back over their contract inventories to see if, the sanctions world has changed things, or, LIBOR repricing. There's just a lot of big regulatory changes that cause you to look back and see whether that treaty still has all the right information in it. And so I think my reaction to the core premise of the question is that, yes, the increasingly global and complex nature of what we sell and try to get into one contract is making this more important, both looking backwards and forwards. But I'll toss that over to you, Jake, just to get started on that trend. You can pick up any part of the question you like.
I mean, my gosh, being in legal today has got to be almost impossible. I'm thinking in particular about in the U.S., right? We refused to pass a U.S.-wide privacy law. So instead, now we've got different states. We got CPRA, Virginia, Utah. For those of you who aren't familiar, there's a ton of actually data privacy laws that that, are relatively new to the US. And instead of taking a national approach, the states are just going crazy with it. And so, look, I would think of, yes, I mean, my gosh, like not having a tool or something to help to stay on top of that, I think would be very difficult. And this has a direct effect on, anybody's listening sales team, if you sell into some of these states. So not just the global level, but if I think about, again, coming from the sales marketing perspective, it's that now there's even more complexity state to state. If your sales team sits in California or does business in California, you don't know what CPRA is, you should turn off this and go look at what it means. And there's a whole bunch of slew of other ones, Connecticut, that have passed a bunch of these laws. So I would just think like today, it's just probably more important to have a tool and system of record that can allow your sales organization to probably not have to think as much about this stuff, but to make sure that the company and organization's covered. But that's kind of the use case that comes to mind for me of just like the complexities I see that, are even making it harder and harder to do business just within the US, within different states.
Diego, Lenovo is certainly global. How's that kind of expressed itself in your world?
I think Jake hit like every single one that you could possibly get. I think that, Lenovo does different things, right? We've got servers, we've got gadgets, we've got now services. And so when you're trying to put these things together, it's also a bit of an amalgamation of some acquisitions, right? A lot of them from IBM. But as you look to put that pricing and those different types of technology together, that does make it much more complicated, right? By far. Yes, all those other areas as well, but just when you're mixing and matching, kind of like a buffet, right? I want this, I want that. It's kind of hard to figure out what legal language is required to help effectuate a legally defensible contract, right? But again, this is where technology comes in. You can leverage it so that it can build you start with a template, right? Or your first draft. Use the technology to say, I'm selling this, I'm selling that one, and this one. Yes, you'll have access to data. You're processing it, or you're controlling it, or just choose your location. I was going to add in GDPR because you decided to pick UK. Like you can use the technology. And Jake, you made this point, right? Keep it simple for the salespeople and let stuff go automatically for them. This is where authoring tools of a CLM come in. Pick what you're doing just from a business related question, and it spits out the right template with the right language so that risk is mitigated. And that's what helps keep it simple. So at least you start off on the right foot. And then it always goes to the normal thing that if certain things are being pushed, like the United States and different states having different privacy issues and what have you, which is a nightmare at the moment, I agree. This is where you leverage technology to keep the questions from a business focus, but the output in this case would be from a legal focus because you're now meeting the best of both worlds.
Jackie?
I actively try to not get into super complicated things like this. Like my personal strategy is not to engage in super complicated things, but what I will say is have a plan for historical backfill, because with these tools, it's from now forward. So have a plan for all the business that you did leading up to that point, so that your legal team has their arms around the historical backfill, so they feel secure to deal with the complications.
Yeah, no,
that is all I will say.
Yeah, no, I think it does get left behind in the enthusiasm to do the next and the next contract as opposed to understanding what's already there. Yeah, I've seen the same thing. We got another great question, so keep them coming, everybody. This might be my personal favorite. Do you see CLM to the legal persona or the sales persona? And I might just take a shot at this myself. From my perspective, the law department is there to serve its customer, right? Its customer is someone within the business, sometimes many people within the business. And, the key to that is the sales team, but it could just as easily be the procurement team. It could just as easily be someone in the business. And so at the end of the day, any solution that doesn't think about both of those sides, the legal department and the team that it serves or the teams that it serves, equally, then I think is not kind of meeting its potential. That's the perspective of our company. Our history is heavily in, a lot of us are lawyers, our history is heavily in legal operations, and our mission in life is to connect legal operations to make an impact in the rest of the business. If we're not doing that, we're not doing our job, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm trying not to make it sound like a cheat by saying both, but we're pretty passionate about both being the answer. Diego, any kind of thoughts on how you balance the various different personas in your project? And
yeah, I think you were good to hit on procurement, Matt, because I think that's missing from the question, right? But I think arguably, right, if you really look at what contract lifecycle management is meant to do as an overall thing, is it's meant to help control, standardize, and move contracts from a request to signature, regardless of where it's coming from. So if you're a salesperson and you're going to build a CLM tool around what your needs are, and you're using it and you're interacting with legal because maybe it reaches out as a task or it does something else, then it's going to help your salesperson. If you're using it like my team is in the legal department, where you're centralizing the contracting process and having other people come to you as the customers, then that's where it's going to work. If you're on the procurement side, maybe you're either part of a procure-to-pay system, you're the front end of an ERP, you name it, right? They're going to require contracts too. So any organization that is needing to put contracts in place, that's where a CLM tool will help you, because the goal is to automate, standardize all of these different processes so that you can be more efficient and you can get to yes a lot faster. That's the goal of a CLM solution, regardless of what organization it sits in.
Jake?
I mean, I think we've covered quite a bit of this at this point. I mean, from the alignment, I think I've harped on that probably the most. I do feel, I guess, if there's something that we haven't kind of hit on too much, that there is this balance, and I'll just say this, I mentioned it briefly. As long as all organizations understand the why, there's sometimes legal has to push things through to sales that they may or may not like. And, you mentioned again, your chief legal officer saying, this is what we're doing, this is what it is. And I'll kind of go back to the why, that if you are trying to get different groups aligned, there's a strong pushback. I would say typically it's because of the lack of the why being explained in a way that makes sense to the benefit of the other parties. So just making sure that you're focusing on that component.
Yeah, take us out on this one, Jackie.
Quieros, no los dos. And it depends, right? So if you are a massive company and you have to be super cautious about the contracts and details, then maybe it's more of a legal solution. Whereas if you are a smaller transaction company and in your growth mode, maybe it's actually neither. It's it's for the buyer. Refactoring around that. So I would say both, and it depends.
Fair. Well, let's conclude with this if we could, and thank you, and keep the questions coming. We'll certainly pause and ask at the end if there are any more questions. But if I could just ask each one of you to tell your favorite story about this. We've been trying to sort of think about the value proposition and the pros and cons and success stories around the whole continuum of CLM. But one core thing that it does is just bring visibility across that that contracting arc, including, I think, Jackie, you mentioned the historic agreements. But if you had to just sort of pick one example where you or a customer found something that they just probably would not have seen, or it surfaced in the context of having a programmatic way, I'm not even going to say software, a programmatic way in which to manage their contracts motion, what would it be? And it can be something macro, it can be something micro, but if we're going to claim visibility as a thing, then what would be your favorite story? Diego, I see you nodding, so I'm going to just ask you.
I think one of the things you lack when you don't have a central repository, right? And whether it's on the sales, it technically should also be on the procurement side as well, right? But you really lack that 360-degree view of your relationship with another party. And so when you start to see, what does my entire contract portfolio look like with so-and-so, right? ABC company, I have all these different things, and now I can start to really rationalize that portfolio and say, where can I cross-sell? Where can I upsell? How much am I buying from them, right? what does the risk look like when I'm buying from them? What have I agreed to with this party? And on the sales side with them, what am I agreeing to on it? And can we help mitigate that risk on one side or reach conclusion and stuff? But that to me has been that visibility into what your relationship looks like with that other person is kind of eye-opening for a lot of our people, right? They had no idea that things like that were going on, as well as if I'm working to sell something with somebody or buy something from somebody and somebody else is doing the same thing, you're losing out on volume, right? Can I get a better discount from volume discount pricing? If I'm selling, can I look to sell more because now my customers are bigger and this one's buying this, that one's buying that. It's two different things, but together they're the same company. Why aren't you buying both all across the board? So that visibility into those relationships is something you don't get when you don't have an electronic tool that helps centralize your repository, give you access to it, makes it searchable, and then also lets you report off of it. Those are real things. And then over that, you layer some AI technology that really helps you mine your contract portfolio for some of these nuggets where you can really go after dollars. Where's leakage? Where's either revenue recognition that's being lost because of some reason? All of those things are great things you can get from leveraging the technology.
Jackie, I feel like you must have witnessed some magical moments. What? Tell us, share.
So the use case that keeps following me, like a stalker, is marketing needed to know who they can, whose logos they can put on the website, who we can reference in emails. Like in legal usually does not have time. I don't have time to do this silly project for you marketing when it's like, no, this could really help. And when I was at Link Squares for 2 years and starting in 2018, where I think legal tech was really like starting to make a real difference. And I remember seeing on it at Clock and ACC. But I think the biggest impact was for like a company, it was wish.com. And I had been messaging their finance person, and I was like, how much time are you spending going through contracts to figure out details? And she's like, are you kidding me? I'm up. It's 2 a.m. right now where I am. Like, I'm only saying this because I'm up doing that. And like really making a massive difference with certainty, right? Because this isn't just like, scale your outreach. This is like real financial terms that have a real material impact for your business. So being able to really, and just not just technology disruption, but like making life better for the people who really have the passion to do stuff well. So seeing that difference is enormous.
Jake.
All right, well, I'll take it home with some of my own mistakes. I remember scaling one of my first sales organizations and not paying attention to this. And the nightmare that once you get to 100, 200, 300 customers, the nightmare it causes whenever this is sitting in PDFs in Salesforce, in signature software, around, hey, what were our terms with the use case Diego gave around, oh, we're selling to this division of Deloitte. What were the terms that we have here? Oh, wait, they've got this term. The nightmare that starts to happen. And I think it's probably one of those processes that it's better to fix it now and come up with some processes, because I can tell you from someone who scaled multiple sales organizations, the cleanup process is not fun. It is not fun at all. And so, once you start to get to even a certain critical mass, putting in place some of these processes and technologies just becomes critical. And it's just another one of those, do it 6 to 12 months before you think you might possibly need it to save yourself a 4-month-long cleanup job later.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's for me, it's just a lot about just the fun of these kinds of conversations and the ubiquity of the value proposition and the footprint of these solutions. Down in at least my screen is Vic, who owns the solution in our world at On It. And, we're sufficiently passionate about our organization. It's kind of like go home, talk to your mom, go home, talk to your kids about it. So maybe we need to rein ourselves in, but this has been a lot of fun. So thank you to all three of you. And thank you. I'm going to pass it back to you, Savannah.
Yes, yes. Thank you all. Thank you, On It, for sponsoring this event. And Jake, go enjoy Costa Rica now. But everybody, thanks for tuning in live. And if you have questions for any of these speakers, feel free to connect and reach out to them on LinkedIn or start a conversation on Sales Hacker. We'd love to continue the conversation there. We look forward to chatting with you later, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.